Tales of the Lorekeeper, Episode 14, The Organist in the Forest. Written, voiced, and produced by Jojo Kaiser. In the forest, it was supposed to be peaceful. The new chapter of our lives. I remember the excitement in my high school sweetheart's eyes when I told her the loan for the cabin was approved. We were going to be moving from the hot sands of Nevada to the cold, lush mountains of Colorado. My sweet Natalie. I remember the first time I ever laid eyes on her in freshman year. Not only was I spending the rest of my long life with her, but we were living in our dream home. We spent the final month in that cramped, overpriced apartment, saying goodbye to our friends we made since we were both kids. Gave our parents the new address, a kiss for our moms, a hug for our dads. We took one last visit by the grave of our friend. The one that brought us together. Put our notices in at our dead-end jobs and got the U-Haul rented. I'd found a job in Colorado as a park ranger, and my sweet wife, Natalie, she found a quiet little bookstore in town right next to the forest where our cabin sat on the edge. We left at the end of the month. The drive was long, but we were both so full of energy, we did the whole 14-hour journey in one shot. No hotel, only stopped for gas and food, and when we got there, it was as beautiful as when we had first looked at it on the website. We met the real estate lady, named Jane, a short, pudgy woman with fire-red curls and a row of freckles across her pug nose. She was cute. Not as beautiful as my wife. We signed the papers and we got the keys, and this was it. We were finally going to live the peaceful life we had always wanted. It was a 2-bedroom with polished wood floors and a beautiful kitchen. The living room had a reader's nook inside some bay windows overlooking the crystal clear creek that outlined our backyard. I watched as the love of my life opened the window over the kitchen sink and breathed into fresh spring air. We would unload the truck tomorrow. Tonight, it was Chinese takeout with a knitted king-size quilt my grandma knitted when I was 7 years old. I looked longingly at the stain that the quilt had gotten when I spilled a can of Coke when I was 9. My mother was furious. I had looked at the stain and felt the back of my eyes sting a bit. Natalie squeezed my hand gently. We shared unspoken words. We were going to miss our lives, our families, our friends. I mean, we were born and raised in Nevada, and for all the harshness of the weather and the dreariness of the sands, it was still home, you know? But we needed this change. We had to do it. There were too many unpleasant memories there. There were some good ones, I mean, sure, but Natalie and I would always feel the sting of losing our dear friend. The next few weeks went by in what felt like seconds. We got the truck unloaded, met our neighbors who lived quite some distance from us. The Johnsons were an older couple who had lived in the area for over 30 years. Mr. Johnson told me I reminded him of himself when he was younger, and I still don't know what he meant by that. And Mrs. Johnson, she made the best macadamia nut cookies I had ever tasted. Natalie made sure to get the recipe. I mean, they were just so heavenly. The other neighbor was one Mr. Bagley, a young, wealthy man who had a different story for why he was so rich every time we talked to him. He won the lottery, he played the stock market, he robbed a bank. Whatever the case, it was always a good time speaking with him and hearing his wild stories. I got to know my coworkers. There was Ted, an ancient man with a beard as white as clouds and as thick as the forest itself. He worked for the government, and we worked for him. Then there was sweet Miss Tasha. She was from New Orleans and always brought the best food for us to share and take home. Young Jackie Jones was an 18-year-old kid fresh out of high school and still had a face full of baby fat and a stubble he didn't quite know how to shave correctly. We had a small crew, but our job was simple. Walk the parts of the forest that belonged to our area, pick up trash, assist campers, make sure people were being respectful. Natalie and I would wake up every morning at 5 a.m., be out the door at 6:30, and see each other at 6 p.m. when we both got home. It was tiring some days, but it was peaceful, like we always wanted. One faithful Saturday, in the middle of the summer, we had decided to have a picnic on the other side of the creek. There was a grove that I had saw about a week prior that seemed perfect for one, and the weather was nice. We packed some sandwiches, our favorite drinks, a blanket, and more, and we went walking. Crossing the bridge over the creek, it took only about 10 minutes and we were there. A beautiful patch of sunlight shined into the grove like a spotlight setting the stage for an afternoon of romance and peace. We set everything up, and we had just started eating when it came. Slowly, but quietly. The sound of an organ playing a morbid tune. We looked around and then at each other. We couldn't tell the direction it was coming from, and what's more, we couldn't quite pinpoint how far away it was. It was faint, yet loud. Far, yet close. And it sounded like it was moving? It's hard to explain, you understand. I doubt anyone could describe it perfectly. It was the most bizarre experience, and one that felt ethereal. Anyway, after a few minutes, it stopped, faded out as one would end a song. The next day, however, I couldn't quite get it off my mind. So I decided to ask people who had experience. I talked to my neighbors. The Johnsons looked at me kind of like I was crazy. They had no idea what I was talking about. They had never heard an organ coming from the forest, and in fact, from what they told me, they don't even know if they could pinpoint what an organ sounds like. Now that I thought about it, how did I know it was an organ? I've never been very musically inclined, you understand. I was kind of a bad student in high school, and I never attended band practices or anything, but in the pit of my stomach, I knew that's what it was. Mr. Bagley had said pretty much the same thing. He had no clue what I was talking about. I mean, again, it just sounded so insane. An organ in the middle of the forest is not something that makes sense to this world, but I know it was there. To be honest, I was worried. Natalie told me it had to be our imaginations, but both of us? Imagining the same haunting melody from the same instrument, both faint and loud, both near and far? No. I wasn't buying it. In fact, I had my suspicions someone was playing a prank on us. There was a boarding school not too far from where we lived, and I was gonna get to the bottom of this. Or at least I thought I was. The next day, I took the day off work, and I went to the boarding school. It was about a 20-minute drive, and it was already shut down. I knew it was there because the Johnsons had told me about it, and when I thought back to it, they had told me that it had closed down about 3 years ago. So there's no one that lives there. There's no mischievous children who could be playing an organ. The more I think about it, the more it just sounds so insane, doesn't it? But I'm not. I'm not insane because... Look, time went on. And slowly but surely, Natalie forgot about the incident, but I didn't. Sometimes, when Natalie went to sleep, I'd lay awake and I would hear it again. A haunting melody on an organ. Both near, yet far. Both faint, yet loud. And when it was my day off and Natalie had to work, I'd go back to that clearing and I'd listen, and every so often I'd hear it again. And again, and again, and again! A year passed, and I kept going out there. It was like a magnet, drawing me to listen to its haunting melody over and over again. What was it? What was making that noise? What was playing that tune? In the winter of that year, a knock came to the door. And I answered it, and was surprised to find an officer. "Mr. Teller?" his gruff voice asked me. I confirmed it was me and opened the door a little bit wider and studied him. He had a big, bushy beard and eyebrows to match. He was a short man and very, very fat. I mean, not much happened around our small mountain town. He didn't have much to do. "Yes?" I asked. "Mr. Teller, I'm Officer Wellburn, and I was just coming to check on you. Your neighbors said they hadn't heard from or seen you in a couple weeks, and your co-workers are quite worried about you as well. Said the last time they saw you, you were in a little bit of a tizzle." I blinked at the man and squinted into his bushy beard. "I've been going to work every day this week," I said, feeling somewhat stupid. Then it struck me. Had I been going to work? I glanced down at my pajamas and they were stained and dull from not being washed. I turned my head back around and realized the entire house was in disarray. Dishes piled up on the sink, old chip bags and wrappers on the couch. The TV was even knocked over. What had Natalie been doing? What had I been doing? I looked back at Officer Wellburn, and his eyes, they contained sorrow. Bleeding, unyielding sorrow. "Mr. Teller, I understand your wife left you some time ago, son." Again, I blinked at him. And all of a sudden, a waterfall of memories came crashing back on me. Natalie and I screaming at each other. I was telling her, I was screaming how she had to come see him. She had to believe me, he was real. Who was him? Who was he? Who was I? What were we fighting about? And then a memory flashed into my mind. And I doubted it. But I had to find out. I swallowed and looked back in the officer's brown, sorrowful eyes. You can assure everyone I'm fine. I'll be back to work soon," I said with more shakiness in my voice than I wanted to let off. I gave him my most winning smile, and he was doubtful, but he left. I got dressed in the only clean clothes I could find, and by the back door was a shovel with dried mud on it. I grabbed it and headed to the clearing. As I approached, the music started to play. And there, right where I expected him to be, was the organist. A shadowy figure in an old top hat dinner jacket ensemble. And he played away on that organ in the middle of the forest floor. The legs of the great black instrument sank into the dirt. He turned his head slowly toward me, and I could almost hear the bones creaking in his neck. Still playing away, that same haunting melody, and smiled yellow crooked teeth at me. His eyes were bloodshot and his skin a sickly green, but his fingers, they were long, elegant. And they played, and they played, and they played. Ooh, ooh, where is she? I asked him, my voice shaking with fear. I tried to stand confident to this monster, but I knew the answer. Oh, you remember, don't you? You wanted her to see the truth. The real reason you couldn't stay in your hometown. His voice rang in my ears, pierced my brain, sent a shiver down my spine, but it wasn't just him. I didn't. I never wanted that. But you did. When you first took her here, you felt the guilt. And now, another body lay on your conscience. The memories flew back and hit me so hard I had to take a stumble back. Freshman year of high school, Natalie was dating Jack Sullivan, my best friend. He was supposed to be my best friend, and I hated him. Hated him. He knew how I felt about Natalie. I spent so many nights crying on his shoulder because I was in love with her, and he still asked her out. How dare he? How dare he betray me like that? Replace the bond that we had held since elementary school. He stabbed me in the back, but you know what? I pretended that I didn't. Because I'm smarter than he was. I invited him to hang out with me one night. Pumped him full of cheap beers and wine that I stole from my mother's cabinet. And then I put him behind the wheel of that old, beat-up Chevy he drove, and I made sure to cut the brake lines. A drunk driving accident, they said. Stupid teenagers. And I played the perfect part. I cried at his funeral. And I stood tall as Natalie leaned on me for comfort. And it didn't take long. It didn't take long. But she was finally mine. I finally had her for myself. In fact, she moved on so quickly, I don't even think she really loved Jack. She always loved me. She had to. But that didn't stop the guilt. That didn't stop the years and years of guilt. I mean, I had everything I wanted. I had the love of my life, a beautiful woman. I had a cabin in the forest. We were away from it all. But I had to tell her the truth. I mean, she loved me. She'd understand, right? She'd understand, right? But she didn't. She screamed at me. Screamed how she hated me. How she never wanted to see me again, but I wouldn't let her do that. Not after I finally had her. Not after I worked so hard to give her a life we both always wanted. I had always loved her, always cared. And now, I turned my head slowly, breaking the gaze of the organist, still playing, to the shallow grave right below his instrument. There she was. I had told everyone she left me, but it wasn't true. It wasn't true. She was buried right here. And I knew it. I turned back to him. He still smiled, still played that melody. And now the curtain closes. How will you perform for the next person you want to think you innocent? I left Mr. Ryan Teller in the fetal position, in his cabin in Colorado. Delivered an account to the police, subtracting the stories of the organist. And then, I waited several days. Later, I went back to that clearing. The dirt had been turned up, and presumably they had found Mrs. Natalie Teller's body. No man and no organ were to be found. I sat in the clearing for several hours, waiting. But nothing came. Perhaps it is because my conscience is perfectly clear. Hey everybody, I'm very sorry to break the illusion that I have here on this channel with these stories, but I just wanted to make a quick note because I know it's going to be brought up in the comments section. I am well aware that the music that is playing during the parts where the organist is supposed to be playing music is not in fact an organ. It is more than likely a piano, and the reason for that is because copyright-free organ music is really hard to find. Unfortunately, I am just one person with no musical ability or talent or even a program to make my own music, and I also don't have the money to pay someone to compose custom music for this series, so I have to rely on what some people say is copyright-free music, and unfortunately that has burned me a couple times, so I've had to fall back on basically guaranteed methods in order to make that. So I'm very sorry that it wasn't organist music. I'm hoping that in the future, when I do get to turn this into like an audiobook or something like that, that I'll have the money to be able to get actual organ music, but for now, I have to work with what I have. So I hope you guys don't mind. I hope you enjoyed the story, and you have been enjoying the story so far, and I will see you in the next one.